All right. Good morning, guys. Hey, Khalil. Bonjour. How you guys doing? Welcome to the stream. Sorry, I'm just finishing up the setup here with a couple of things that I want to show you actually before we start with today's stream. I just want to clean the screen a little bit. Hang on a second. Sorry if my voice seems a little bit off. I think I'm getting sick. Yeah, so just give me 1 second and I'll explain. All right. So today I just thought, hopefully you have seen some of the clay brushes that I've shared. I think last week. It's been about a week, and the response has been fantastic. Thanks so much if you have already got it. It really helps with the support and everything, and especially when you send me the stuff that you make with them, it's really encouraging to see that it's actually being used, and what you guys come up with is sometimes completely different from what I expected, or like as in completely different from what I envision the brushes to be, or how I use them more than anything. And so it's like really cool to see how you are actually taking them to the next level. So what I thought was I'm going to run down so that everyone understands a little bit what the brushes are, what to expect from the brushes. I did a little video that comes with the pack as well, but I wanna give you kind of like my approach. So we're gonna be like sculpting a head, and I'm gonna keep it very sketchy so that it would look like clay, like digital clay. That is the idea. But before we get into that, let me just bring this here. I just want to show you guys the Neocons. I'm gonna put it here so that you can see properly. It's gonna be hard. I'm gonna share a link. You might have seen this already as well. I'll share a link in here. So this is a brand new contest that is already live, and you can join. It's completely free to join. The sponsors are Wacom, the Pixologic team, and the 3D Concept Artist, which is the other website that I run, where you can find the Extra Mile course as well. So this is a really cool challenge. I'm very excited about it. I think it's gonna be very cool. The theme is kind of like the unknown, and the whole point of the challenge is just to give you guys an space to just be creative, come up with something new, push yourself, give yourself a deadline, which I think is sometimes really important, so that you complete a project. And the whole idea is just to interpret the phrase 2020 first contact. So like without putting any other sort of like condition or anything like that, you just interpret that phrase, whatever comes to your mind when you think 2020 first contact. Obviously the image that I made is a little bit suggestive, so yeah, if you want to keep it within that sci-fi theme, totally up to you. But yeah, I'm really excited about it because you have plenty of time, about 35 days, about a month. You can participate in 3 different categories, and they're going to be really cool prizes for every different category. So these images that I put here, they're kind of like references for you guys, so that you yeah, so you can see, for instance, the character, there's no background or anything, so you can just work on the character. You can totally put it in a scene if you want, but it's pretty much just presenting a character. The environment and the transport, this is just to show the difference in style, so you can appeal to your stick to your guns basically, and work on your own style, or just try something new. That is the idea. So you can submit your entry to any of these categories, and the prizes are pretty awesome. So for the first place, we're gonna have a Wacom Intuos Pro series subscription, full access to the Extra Mile course, which is the course that I have in the 3D Concept Artist. Miguel Guerrero, who's also a streamer, super talented artist, he is also offering 1 hour portfolio review session with him. So if you win first prize, you can you can speak directly to the man, which is, I think, is pretty powerful stuff. The digital clay pack, which I'm going to be showing you today, the ZBrush skin brushes pack as well, and you know, a few other really cool prices for the second place and the third one. So the guidelines are pretty simple. The judges are absolutely amazing. I have to refresh this. I don't know why this loaded like this, but you can see the panels of judges are just incredible. There we go. So this is Miguel, Jama, Magdalena, Pascal, Glocolongi, and Tim King. So even if even if you don't win, you still get the chance to show your work to these guys, which is I think is pretty amazing. And the way that it works is really simple. You just go to the end of this page. Once you're ready, obviously probably you won't be able to be ready right now. Choose your file, enter a name for the image, choose which category you want to submit it to, email address, and that's it. You are participating. Now there are a few things that you need to keep in mind, like it has to be an original artwork. But other than that, you just follow these rules. They're pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory. Anyway, I just wanted to show you this because it is absolutely exciting to be hosting it also, but to be able to see what you guys come up. And one of the good things about this is because we have like about 35 days. That's roughly about 3 to 4 more streams. So I'm not a judge, so I'm in the position of helping. So if you guys start sharing, by the way, the hashtag at the end, you'll see it here, 2020 first contact. If you share that tag, I will be able to see what you guys are doing, and I will be able to provide some advice in the work in progress and all that, because again, I'm not a judge, so I can provide help. Hey Bichar, how's it going, man? Good to have you here. Comics Legend original meaning, it just means it's your original concept, right? And it's something new. As in, you could have pieces that you can reuse totally, but it's a new concept, right? It's not like if you have a spaceship from 3 years ago, you can submit that. That's the idea with the work in progress. Which, I mean, even if that was the case, like if you could submit something that you did 3 years ago, I'm 100% sure that you could do a much better job right now than 3 years ago, right? So why waste the opportunity of like doing something new that I'm sure you can do much better? That is the thinking behind it. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into ZBrush. This is the digital clay pack. I'll share a link as well. That's what we're gonna be doing today. Try to achieve something like that. This is the work of Bichar, who's in the stream as well. So thanks so much, brother, for testing the brushes. He's, you know, it's just another level, right? Another level of skills. So this that's the work that was done by Bichar in using the clay pack. Yeah. So if you go to that link, you'll see those are the brushes. That's what I'm gonna be showing you today. Basically, if you look at this image, right, it's kind of like going from something like this. We're gonna sketch up this really quick. It's gonna be very sketchy again, and then I'm gonna show you how to turn it into something like that using the brushes. So basically adding those high frequency details and those imperfections, which I think is sometimes the hard part. we tend to do things in 3D a little bit too perfect for my liking, so you know, symmetry and everything is very perfect. But yeah, that's the idea with the imperfection. So I'm gonna leave it here, guys, so we can start with the actual stream. But if anyone has any questions about that, feel free to put in the chat. Other than that, I'm gonna go ahead and start right now. Does the digital clay pack include the lighting scene with the wooden stand? It includes the wooden stand. If you go to the website, you'll see exactly everything that comes with it. There's no lighting scenario, but it does come with the extra asset just to light up your scene. All right, so what I have here is actually one of the plain heads, the male head that comes with ZBrush. So you'll have access to that if you want. I just went ahead and changed the resolution of Dynamesh to 56 because to block out something like this, I prefer to have a lot less resolution, especially because I do a lot of moving with the move brush and the AccuCurve. So yeah, let's go ahead and start with that and just simplifying all of these a bit more. So I also have my my anatomical head as a reference there. So I will be using that as a reference to give this a much realistic, or not realistic, a more accurate shape. But that's about it. Hey Starcat, how's it going? Thanks for joining us today. And I'll be doing a bit of everything, but mostly it's gonna be me sketching this. So not a lot of tips or tricks, I guess, so far, or at this stage. So if you guys have any questions about something else, I'm happy to try to talk over the process. But yeah, other than that, there's not a lot of of tips that I can give you at this point. It's just pushing and pulling things in a very low resolution with the move brush. All right, I think that's slightly better. I'm gonna make the neck thinner, make it a bit more because that's another thing, right? Sometimes with 3D, it's all good when you try to, when you're practicing anatomy. I think that's great. I mean, what I'm about to say, but when you're practicing anatomy, I think it's fine. But in most cases, you won't have like a perfect anatomical model, as in, you know, like a perfect écorché type of character, right? So I like to play around with those ideas that not everyone is the same, obviously. So, and you're gonna have people that are skinnier, you know, chubby people, and that's I think that's more realistic than anything else. So, trying to go for something that is not perfectly, you know, well defined. Not let me rephrase that. Like, the anatomy should be proper, but it doesn't mean that it has to be perfectly muscular or anything like that, like showing all the muscles. So I'm gonna go for someone that is maybe a bit more skinny, so the bony landmarks of this head will be a bit more visible, or more easy to spot, I guess. Or not, we'll see how it changes. I mean, when I'm designing in 3D, if you follow like the previous set of streams, you'll realize that is, you know, it's an ever changing process. It's very organic. You start with something, and then halfway through you go, you know what, let's try something else, and then you end up changing the entire design. That's not necessarily the case when you have a plan, but when you directly designing in 3D, it becomes, it has that feel. Like you start with something, it looks good at the beginning, but then you start changing things, and you find something that looks a lot better. So far, all I've done is using it's been using the move brush, and I have the AccuCurve enabled, so that allows me to create this very pointy, sharp, you know, pulling those edges very sharply, and that's really helpful for a few reasons, in my opinion. So I know that not a lot of people use it, and that's totally fine. It's like just a different workflow, but when you use it, I think it's a valid option, and it's at least very convenient for different reasons. So reason number one is that you get that very sharp line, or very sharp point, and at this stage it helps you to maintain an idea of the plane. So for example, if I pull this one right there, even though it's just pulling an edge, or a point, it creates certain edges that you can follow and redefine. So that's one of the reasons I like it. The other reason is that I don't have to worry too much about, like, for instance, areas like this on the ear, because with this point you can pull it a little bit more sharply, and it's not gonna pull the outside, or the kind of like the rest of the Jesus, I'm having trouble explaining today myself. So let's say actually let me bring in my Epic Paint and I'll show you why I like using this. Let's see. Okay, so with this brush, if I go around this area with the standard brush, oh sorry, the standard move brush, you'll have, let's say, this is the size of your brush, and then you pull it this way, so everything that is within the range, in a way, within the range of this sphere is gonna be pulled. So you're gonna end up with something like that, right? So it will kill this kind of like this outside of the ear. Whereas if you have the Aki curve enabled, even if you have the brush like this size, right, the effect of the curve is gonna be, instead of a soft shape like that, is gonna be a more pointy one like that. So even if you have this size, it's gonna push things like that, kind of. Hopefully that makes more sense. So that's why I like using it, especially at these early stages. And that's another reason why I keep everything very, very low in terms of resolution. I mean, from the distance, you kind of tell that it's a face, hopefully. But you get closer and then you'll just see it's not very well defined. But at this stage, that's pretty much what I want, to keep it very, very loose and being able to change things on the fly if I need to. All right. I think that's not too bad. Let's go ahead and I'm gonna refine the nose because I haven't touched it actually. All right, so I think that's looking all right. We could be at a point that I can increase the resolution a little bit and start adding some other landmarks like the eyes and that sort of thing. Let's see. Could you watch? I just watched the review of the Cintiq Pro 24 and it was very helpful. No worries. I'm glad that you find it useful. What is the name of the program that you can draw over? Yeah, this is called Epic Pen. Hey, Mr. Sanson, welcome to the stream. Today's plan, I'm just doing a quick sketch of a head, and then I'm gonna show some of the digital clay pack brushes, so that you can achieve like the digital clay pack, the digital clay look. Like I said, I think I'm getting sick, so my brain is like a mush right now. All right, so I'm gonna increase to 128. Control click and drag, so we have a lot more resolution than what we had before. Still pretty sketchy, but more resolution. So I'm gonna smooth things out a bit. I'm gonna take time here to refine the thickness of the ear. Still doing the same thing, like I haven't actually changed brushes. This is still using I'm still using the move brush and the smooth brush. That's all. Nothing too different right now. All right, I think we are at a point that I can go ahead and bring in some of the brushes. We just do a fine tuning here, the shape of the head, bring the forehair a bit forward. I think I'm gonna flatten the face a bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring in some eyes just so that we can start sculpting those. And I'm gonna go for like a more, traditional sculpting effect. So I'm going to actually sculpt the eye. So I'm going to go ahead and append a sphere. And let's go ahead into solo mode. I'm going to dynamesh this at 128 is fine. And let's go ahead and bring in the symmetry, the radial symmetry on the y-axis, no, z-axis. Yeah, something like that is fine. I'm gonna use the clay brush. I also have the smooth brush ready. So with this radial symmetry, I'm just gonna establish what the iris would be, and that will be a concave surface. So if you look at it from the side, this is what I currently have. I'm gonna use the clay brushes to do a concave, like push things like so. Then I'm gonna take the same brush probably and create a pupil by pushing more geometry that way. And then I'm gonna use maybe the masking tools or something like that to create what could be the highlight. And the highlight, like the effect of the highlight, would be just geometry that sticks out. So all in all, this is going to look, I mean, I know this looks weird, but the surface that I'm going to be creating is going to be like that. So this is kind of like the profile if you were to cut it, the red line, if you were to cut it in the middle so that you can see what's inside. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to hold the Alt key, and because I have the, actually, let's increase that to 16 so that it does it a little bit faster. So this is going to be the iris. There we go. And of course, with the smooth brush, you can simplify that. Right, so that's what I meant about the iris. Maybe we can exaggerate it even more. Because again, this is not going to be like textured or anything in a way. So it's just going to be pure geometry. So the sharper we create these lines, the more definition we're going to have at the end. I think I'm going to increase the resolution a tiny bit. Okay. All right, and then now for the pupil, what I'll do is I'm going to use the same symmetry, the radial symmetry tool. I'm going to hold the Control key, and I'm just going to mask that pupil there, and that's going to be the pupil. And I'm going to invert it, go to the Gizmo 3D. Let's turn this symmetry for the time being, center to the unmasked areas. I want to push the scale on the Z axis just to flatten it a little bit more, and then push it in. Maybe scale it up a bit. And let's go ahead and redynamesh. And we can use the symmetry again with the smooth brush to just smooth these borders a little bit. All right. So now you have from distance, that's kind of like the effect that you'll get. All we have to do now is create that like that highlight effect. So we could do it with dynamesh, or we can just append something else. Actually, let me think, because I want to show you. I'll show you a different technique, but yeah, I'm gonna duplicate the same object. So I'm gonna have exactly the same object, but I'm gonna rotate it. Let's reset the rotation. I'm gonna rotate this 180 degrees. So hold, whoops, center of the unmasked areas. Holding Shift, and I think it's not center because of the flat thing that we just created. But let's get out of solo mode. Turn off the head. I'm just gonna push this forward. All right. Then now they're roughly sitting around the same area. Let's go into solo mode. And I'm going to use this one just to clip everything but an area which is going to be the highlight. So holding Control and Shift, I can access the clip center circle. So if I hold Control, Shift, and click and drag, this is what I'm going to get, and it's kind of like a tube pushed through, and that is the idea. So before I do that, let's go ahead and enable the two eyes, I can also go into transparency mode. Hopefully you guys can see that. Yeah. And here's where I can create that highlight. So I'm gonna go for, oops, Control Shift, click and drag, something like that. I want to cover a bit of the pupil actually. Right? So what I just did there is clip that secondary piece of mesh, but it's sitting right there, and it has that, you know, rotation, basically, this curvature. So it's gonna work just fine. And then we can just use any of the, maybe trim curve here. Oops, this way. And we can go ahead and redynamesh that, and maybe use the smooth brush to soften it a bit. So from the distance, that little tube that we created, I know it was a little bit extreme, the steps, too complicated, but that's going to help us get that sort of highlight in a more sculptural approach. The reason I did the duplicate and all that is so that I can get that nice curvature here, so that it sort of suggests that there is actually a cornea or a, you know, something going on here, like a lens, right? And that's the only reason why I did that. Other than that, you can just sculpt it yourself or bring in a tube and do the same thing. So now I'm going to go ahead and merge these two things together, merge down, okay. If you want, you can dynamesh, but at this point, I think this is fine as it is. And now I'm going to go ahead and reset the rotation, make sure symmetry is off, center to the unmasked areas, bring in my head, and I'm going to position this in place. And this is something that I like to do very early on in the process. The setup of the eye, place the eye, just so that I have another reference to fill in the areas around the eye. So I'm gonna jump back to the move brush, give this guy a bit more space here before I push the eye even further. Some slight rotation as well. All right. Now what I can do is, if I mirror this guy, if I mirror the eye, the highlight will be on the other side. So I need to mirror it and rotate it so that the highlight is sort of like pointing the same direction. So what I'll do is I'm gonna duplicate, so that they're completely different tool or subtools. Then I'm gonna mirror, and you'll see that's what I meant. The highlight is coming from both sides, and I want to make sure that they are consistent. So I'm gonna center to the unmasked areas, go to rotation. Is that I think I made a mistake because I changed the rotation beforehand. So let me just delete that one, and I'm gonna undo a couple of things. All right, so now this thing is back to where it was, like it's pointing in the right direction, and it's gonna be easier for manipulating the other one. So now let's go ahead and get out of solo mode. Let's duplicate now. Let's go ahead and mirror, and now let's go ahead and switch to the other eye, center to the unmasked areas, and now I can rotate just to try to match that a bit better. All right, so now at least the highlight would be in a similar position, and then what I can do now is to get that rotation that I had before. I'm gonna merge these two together. So merge down, and I can bring in the gizmo, and if I enable symmetry, not radial, just normal symmetry, right, you'll see I get this effect. So that's really all I want. I'm just gonna move it a tiny bit and then lower the angle. I think I need to push them closer together as well. I'm also with perspective on, so all right. So of course this is going to be a more stylized character than anything. And let's go back to the head. And now that I have the eyes in place, I can start working on the eyelids and that sort of thing. But that's gonna be kind of like a sculptural meshes. So I'm just gonna add to it. So I'm gonna use the damp standard brush to delineate where the eyelids would be, and then I'm gonna fill those gaps basically. So I'm gonna hold the Alt key. It's kind of like a inverted effect, just like a knife tool, like this, and then on the other side as well. So that roughly gives me an idea of the eyelids, at least the kind of like the edge or the border, and then I can go with the move brush and then just place the eyelids a bit better and start trying to get that shape and make sure that the lacrimals is visible and all that sort of something. And of course, I think at this point we probably need a bit more resolution. So I'm gonna go ahead and increase that resolution quite a bit for the head. And I'm still using the move brush with the AccuCurve. So I think I'm gonna have to move the profile back a bit. And now the ears are too forward. So I'm just gonna mask that area, invert it, and then push this back a bit. All right, so now that I have sort of established where the eyelids would be, in a way, now I need to give them shape, because having just this almond sort of shape, that's that's not realistic, or it's not the way that it looks in real life. So it's more like this, like if you have the pupil here. So I need to go for this type of shape. So that would be the next step. Generally speaking, that's something that I do as I progress with the rest of the sculpture, but just to keep things simple, I'm gonna go ahead and start tweaking those shapes straight away. And another thing that it's very important, and it's one of the common mistakes I see when I see people creating eyes for the first time, is not only the shape that they go for, is also that they don't give enough thickness to the eyelids. So you end up with something very, very thin that looks very weird. So make sure that you allowed enough thickness for the eyelid. All right, again, this is just a bunch of little pushes with the move brush. I haven't started actually sculpting anything just yet. I want to also give it a tiny bit of rotation. So one of the things that you will find that gives the effect of a flat face, like if you look at a primate or like a bonobo or a gorilla, a chimp, they will have the eyes. I don't know if you notice this, but let's say these are a couple of eyes, or let me just do it again. Let's say that these are the eyes of a gorilla. One thing you might notice, and that's why they have like a flat face, and you when you're sculpting something like that, you'll see this very, very flat, is because the line of the corner of the eyes is kind of like in a line. Basically, that's what it is. So you could trace a line and it's almost like a flat line, whereas with a human, usually there is a variation in those points. So if I want to make sure that my face doesn't look flat, I'm not gonna keep this in a straight line. I can go ahead and give it a bit of a curvature. Let's say push this one lower, or like, you know, put it low, and this one up. Or for a more realistic approach, I would go for like this type of shape. So I'll put this one up, actually, this one down. And this corner is not like the actual corner of the eye is lower, is that the fat here will make it look, from a visual point of view, you'll see in a second, will make it look like it's lower. So I'll probably do that as well. So just lower a tiny bit more, and then keep this one a bit more straight. And that's gonna help with the with how this head is read. All right, so how are we going with time? All right, I'm gonna speed this part a little bit more, just because I want to make sure we get to the brushes. Although once we have the base ready, working with the brushes, you'll see it's really quick, and that's part of the reason why I created them, because it allows you to create those details very fast, and it's very simple. It's not like the brushes need a tutorial to how to use them, because that's also part of the idea, that you can explore what they do and figure out different ways to use them. It's more about giving you a little bit of context and my workflow and the reason why I made them, more than anything. All right, let me just define the nostrils a little bit better. Okay, I'm gonna bring in my damp standard brush, and with this brush, what I'll do is just define the lips or the mouth. So that's gonna be my mouth, and then I'm gonna invert the effect of this brush to define the bottom lip and the top one, and then just smooth that out. So now that I have that, I can go ahead and start figuring out the rest of the shapes of the face. And just marking out, nothing too fancy, just mark out some areas, so that I can also visualize how they look from different angles, and I can go ahead and tweak them as well. But I'm gonna use the move brush again to refine the shape of the mouth. And because these are just markings, I'm not like too fussed about going over them and delete them too much. I can go ahead and then just redefine them again. So it's more about getting an idea of a sense of the volumes more than anything at this point. So it's just a lot of little tweaks here with the move brush. All right. Let me just check the chat, and then we're probably gonna jump into the more sculpting side of things with the clay brush. Pablo, which filter did you use when you were beta testing the ZBrush 2019, that moon space car like Moebius paint? So that's a custom filter that I created. I did share that, so if you look into my ZBrush guides website, there will be a guide about that, about the beta testing tools, and then you can get them from there. Hi from Japan. Hey, thanks for joining us. Someone please help with haircuts. If you go to the ZBrush guides and then just filter by hair or hair effects, there's like a couple of almost 3 different guides showing different ways to approach that with haircuts as well. I got a question about the challenge. My skills draws are not really good. I can ask for a friend to help me with the concept. Sure, if you want to base it, you can actually grab someone else's concept. That's not I mean, that will count against like the originality of the concept because it's not yours, and you have to credit the person that did the concept. But yeah, you can give it a go with morph brush. Not sure what that means. Hey Rake, how you doing? Reporting in. Good to have you here. Any extra milers here? I think it's just you and me for the time being. I don't recognize any other names. But anyway, let's go ahead and continue. I'm gonna bring in my clay build-up brush. Probably it's gonna be a good one, and I'm gonna start just refining these shapes. So at this point, it's just refining volumes rather than defining anything. But this brush is really good to also sort of like cover those markings that I have already done. I'm gonna give it a bit more volume here on the lips. But you see, I'm just keeping everything very, very loose. Actually, let's just work with larger brush size so we can start establishing a bit of a flow. And one thing that you probably notice is that I sort of lose the original planes that come with that default head very quickly, and maybe that is just because I'm already used to those sort of like planes of the head, and I have my reference as well. But it's always a good idea to try to keep those, or I think might be a good idea for some of you guys that might just getting started with that, or like getting started with working on sculpting on faces, to keep those planes for a little bit longer rather than just smooth everything out straight away like I did. I forgot to mention that, because that will keep your proportions and everything in shape. Just a thought. I'm gonna bring in my damp standard brush and then just do a couple of lines so that I can maintain those lines the way that they should be, and temporal line, something like that. And again, this just needs to we just need to keep an indication of where the muscles are, and make it look like a face really. But then it doesn't have to be super well polished or anything, because that's the whole point of this exercise, just to make it look like it's just a work in progress, just a clay. You can get super detailed and super polished stuff with clay straight away, or not straight away, but like when you work with just like real clay, you can make it look super polished and really, really nice. But what I like about that that workflow, that that material in real life, is the fact that at the early stages you have something that is really, really sketchy, and it's just the gesture what you're trying to capture, and that's what I love about it, about that that look. And that is really why I created those brushes, to get those imperfections and work on those a bit faster. Okay, I'm gonna bring this part of the head a bit lower. So this is a cool thing that you can do. I'll show you in a second. Let's just add a bit more volume here. I'll show you a cool thing that you can do to define the eyelids, especially the top eyelid, because that's another thing that I see, as especially with someone that is just starting. So this is kind of like beginner's tips, I guess. And I'll show you what I'm talking about in a second. Just gonna go around the face and add volume, and at the same time, I'm pushing Alt as well. Every time that I go over an area, I just push it back or forward, just using the Alt key, but the same brush. We'll probably have to define the ear, but we'll come back to this in a second. I just want to show you something else. And again, all of these sort of markings that I'm doing, they're gonna be removed in a second when I started adding a bit more fat, and I'm figuring out the expression of this guy, because right now it's pretty generic. This is something that actually, all right, I've been just like going all over the place right now, but basically this is another tip I can give you if you working on a realistic head, or just practicing anatomy. Just looking at it from an unusual point of view, it will help you refine certain volumes and get familiar with certain things, landmarks or bony landmarks and that sort of thing. Just because you might, if you're just doing the head in the normal position, it's like the usual position, right? You that's how you see people most of the time, right? And then you have like this preconceived idea of what it should look like, and even though you're copying from something, maybe you're relying on your memory, and that is the worst thing. You know, good memory. I know people have like good memory. I'm not. I don't have a lot of insight into the matter, but I know that relying on memory is not 100%, not even 50% a good thing. We can be tricked, and our brain can be tricked. So don't rely on what you think it looks like. This is one way to do it. So for example, this area right here looks pretty weird to me, so we need to refine that. And it's just also the idea of because you're working in 3D, working from different angles is an ideal approach. Anyway, what I was going to say before getting into that is that the other sort of like thing that I see people doing, especially someone just starting, is that when the eyes are open, if I do, let's just do it over this guy, right? So when the eyes are open, the top lid actually moves quite a bit more than the lower lid, right? So if I'm gonna do it. Let's assume that the right hand side or the right eye of this character is closed or is sleeping. So the top eyelid would be kind of like almost even more than that. I'm gonna exaggerate it, right? So that's how it would close. So you have the bottom eyelid here, and now the character is sleeping, right? So that means that when the eyes are open, this eyelid actually pushes things quite a bit, and it creates this very sharp line, and that's generally speaking what you see, like a fold of the like a fold back of the top eyelid. It will vary obviously between races. So an Asian male would it will look slightly different, and it's just, for me, it's more complex to sculpt that, but I'm gonna give you an idea. So if you hold the control key with the mask lasso, and I'm gonna go ahead and do something like this, just mask what that sort of line would be, just refining that mask, right? And then you can just go with the move brush and push this forward, and it's kind of like adding that extra bit of fat in there. I think it's a bit too much, but you get the idea. When I use the move brush to push things back a bit, and in fact you can go ahead and do the same thing as in holding control to keep that in check, and then take the upper eyelid and just push it. Almost like underneath that that fold. Is there any particular reason why I would like a model to look like clay? Yeah, for aesthetic purposes. I mean, that is the reason, because I want it to look like clay. that's the ultimate reason, and I think it's just a personal preference, and that's why most of the time that's how I build my resources, right? I build something that I want to create for myself, or that or maybe something that I'm struggling with. I'm gonna just do a quick redynamish. Hang on a second, with lower more resolution. So yeah, something that I would like to build for myself, or sometimes some things that I struggle with, so I find a different way to do it, or sometimes it's just for pure aesthetic purposes that I think that it looks good, or just to do presentation renders, whatever the reason is. When I build any resource that then I share online, that is really why I do it. So in this case of the clay brushes, the response has been phenomenal, and a lot of people, I think, they like and they appreciate the same effect, because there's something very tactile, very real about trying to achieve these imperfections, and I think that's why people like it, to be honest, and that's why I like it as well. But other than that, there's no any reason really to try to achieve that. Like, I don't know if I would send a client a work in progress that looks very sketchy like in clay. I don't know. Maybe. Like, I haven't done it, but I don't think it will. It's something very personal, kind of like for personal portfolio stuff. I think it looks cool. All right, I'm gonna bring a larger brush sizes now, or like larger brush than what I've been using, and I'm gonna start adding some more volumes here. Maybe with the clay brush. What time is it? 10. How about like about 1 hour? So it's all good. I'm gonna bring in my move brush, and I'm gonna do some refinements here. And I wanna do a bit of work on the ear that we haven't touched really. And again, all of these markings and very extreme cuts are gonna hopefully disappear in a second. But they help me maintain or keep an eye on the proportions and where the things are placed from different angles. All right, let's go back to the clay builder brush. But yeah, this process is just sculpting, really, just refining volumes, and you see that I've probably gone over this same area a few times now, and that is part of the idea. I'll check the chat in just a second. I know there's some movement in there. I can see it from the corner of my eye. 1 second. Because this is just the same thing, right? It's just going over the same area a few times. I actually should have some background music playing right now. Just refining the expression a little bit. And I wanted to go for like something skinny, but you know, these things change. So I'm happy with where this guy's going. It's not final by any means. Things can change, but I'm happy with the overall shape. Let me have a look at the chat, and then we'll do the ears very quickly, and then we probably need to start working with the clay stuff pretty soon. All right, let's do a quick save. Let's check the chat. How do you keep the top eyelid fold crisp when you need to redynamesh? Just increasing the resolution like I did. It's not like super crisp anymore, but at this sketching level, it doesn't really matter. If you want, you can use the Sculpting Pro with with a smaller brush size, so that gives you more resolution. I'm gonna turn off the thumbnail. I didn't realize it was on. Sorry, guys. So you can see the chat. Yeah, so you can use the Sculpting Pro, but at this stage, I'm not worried about that at all. Like, if I want to, I can just go ahead and redefine it, do the same process again, and redynamize with even a higher resolution just to bring that back. But that's it. I have a question. I have a problem with masking pen. I have a talent, then when I press Control, my mask is not fully opaque, but it's very pressure sensitive. Is there anything I can do to eliminate that? See on live, nobody do that. Sorry for my English. So if you hold Control and click and drag this, with the mask pen, I'm just applying a lot of, not a lot of pressure, sorry. So it's very, very soft, and that's actually a good thing, so that you can control a nice gradient of the mask. If you want something very sharp, you just press like harder, and if you want to refine the kind of like the edges of the mask, you can hold Control and click once on the mask, and that will blur it a few times. I'm just holding Control and clicking, or you can hold Control and Alt and clicking it to invert it and sharpen the line. I don't know if that answers your questions. What were the changes in storage 2001.1 that made your digital clay brushes possible? No, nothing to do with the brushes. It's just that I always keep my versions of ZBrush updated. 1.1 is just a fix, some little bugs. So because I did it with this latest version, it's not compatible, or they're not compatible with previous versions. But because all ZBrush updates are free so far, it's like, why would you change unless you're working in a studio that doesn't allow you to update? Cool. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and do a bit of the ear. So the way that I'm gonna approach this is pretty much in the same way that I do all the sculpting, just using the damp standard brush to sort of define the areas initially. Okay, something like that, and then that's just my marking. Then I go with my clay builder brush or the clay brush, doesn't matter. In this area that is very thin, I will probably enable backface masking so that it doesn't affect the back, so I can more freely add volume here. And I can push these with holding Alt. All right, so pretty basic, but now we can go ahead and use the move brush and start sort of like sharpening all of these areas and the edges. Okay, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time in here. I'm gonna keep it again very, very sketchy, as in it would be a work in progress, so I can, I can get away with that because I said, all right, this is just a work in progress, so it's not gonna be perfect. So I'll say that the ear, I just started working on the ear in my work in progress, so it's not gonna be perfect, just something like that. But it's good enough to understand that there's an ear in there, and it's a human ear. You can go with the damp standard brush and redefine some bits and pieces, but that's something that I also want to do with the clay brushes. So you'll see it's very, very sketchy, and I want to keep it like that. I don't want to go too overboard with the refinement, because I'm gonna even destroy not, or just change or add details even further with the clay brushes. just want to make sure that this nose bridge is in the right place. So quick marking in there. Alrighty. I think this stream has been the one that I haven't talked as much as the other ones, and I think it's because exactly the process that I'm doing. I really like don't really speak much when I'm doing this. I just put some music in the background, and then I just lose myself into this, you know, refinement and sculpting, because it's not nothing other than sculpting. There's no a specific technique other than just looking at it from different angles using 2 or 3 brushes at this point, and you know, keep refining those volumes. So I don't have to think too much other than, you know, keeping an eye on proportions and where things are placed and the muscle groups of the face. And that's also why I have a handy image here, that if I rotate on the side, I have a quick reference, although it's not exactly the same, but I have a quick reference of how everything is looking and how everything should be placed, so I can judge, you know, proportions a little bit faster. Anyway, so I think we're getting there. What I can do is, with the damp standard brush, I'm gonna, with a smaller brush size, I'm gonna just redefine some of these lines. But again, I don't want to overdo it, because that's something else that I want to do with the brushes. There's a couple of there are a couple of knives brushes that I think are really handy for this type of stuff that I'm currently doing. So I don't want to do too much. But we'll get there. We'll get there. And if you guys have any questions about it, about what I'm doing, feel free to put it in the chat. I'll try to talk about that as I finish some of the refinement. I think the mouth is too high. Okay, we are getting there. Let's see. How did I start in the 3D world, and how? So the first thing that I had contact with in terms of 3D, you know, aside from the, you know, the usual inspirational movies and everything, which for me were Terminator 2, Jurassic Park, that sort of thing. That's kind of like the introduction to, oh, there's something like 3D that can create like these type of worlds, and they look pretty awesome. That was kind of like my first introduction to them. But in more practical terms, the first thing that I did was a long time ago. I think 2000. I'll say 2000 and no, actually, yeah, 2002 or 2003, 2002 probably. A long time ago. There was this. Well, Blender has been around for ages, so I had access to Blender, a very early version of Blender, not as user friendly as it is right now. And there was a magazine, and I can't remember what the name of the magazine was, but there was like a tutorial on how to create a roller coaster in Blender, like animation and everything was in that magazine. So I had the magazines and I had access obviously to Blender. I didn't have a powerful computer or anything like that. I remember it was like at the time, I think it was like 128 megabytes of RAM, and that was like a big thing. Something like that. Anyway, that was kind of like my first thing, or my first contact with 3D, as in practical sense, and didn't come out like perfect or anything, but it was a challenge, and I sort of like managed to do something, not exactly what it was in the tutorial, but there was something in there that you could say, okay, it looks like a roller coaster. And yeah, so that was kind of like my first approach, or my first time with it, with anything that was 3D related. And after that, I just keep like getting involved with 3D stuff. Soon after that, actually, I realized, or I learned, I don't know how, I don't remember why, but I learned that concept artist was an actual job. I didn't know that. That there was a job dedicated for concept art. And a few years after I was already at uni, I decided to study animation, like 3D animation. So what I studied was actually more related with movement than what I'm doing right now, like sculpting and all that. And I think that's one of the reasons. I mean, it's something that it really helps when you're working with sculptures. I think if you have like a background in animation, it really helps to understand a bit more of the anatomy and how things move, because that's what you study, I guess. So you have that sort of like at the back of your mind all the time when you're sculpting, if you come from an animation background. So that's what I studied. That's how I got started. And then yeah, I learned about this concept art thing that I didn't know about, and it was kind of like a huge revelation for me. And I said, that's it. That's what I would try to. That was what I'll strive to be, just a concept artist. Because yeah, that's what was resonating with me more than anything else, and that's what I'm being fortunate to be doing for a while now. That's how I got in the world of 3D. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay, I think we are pretty much ready to start working with the clay brushes. We have about 40 minutes, so that's perfect timing. I'm gonna do one more pass, refinement of the position of these volumes just with the move brush. Just changing the expression slightly. I'm gonna lower the eyelid so it looks a little bit more sleepy, like closing the eyes a bit more. Another little tip in terms of like volumes and all that is that the iris should be almost like 50% of the entire length of what you see of the eye, roughly speaking. So let's say here is my iris, and here's the outline of my eye. So if the visible area of this eye, let's say that this is 100%, roughly speaking, again, this is just like, kind of like standard rough stuff estimations. That's a horrible color. Let me do it with, I'll do it with white. That's another horrible color. I'll do it with green. Okay, so this one should be 50% like in length. So yeah, just allow for like 25 and 25 on each side. Again, roughly speaking, but that also should help you to maintain an idea on the sizing and proportions. Hopefully, it does help me knowing these little things so that I can keep an eye on that. So I'm sure they somehow would be helpful for you as well. Alrighty. I think we are in a good position. So I'm gonna go ahead and do a quick save, and I'm gonna duplicate all these and then start working with the clay brushes. Let's have a quick look at the chat. Comics Legend, what's your favorite music to listen to while working? I listen to a lot of Latin music. You know, just not necessarily like, when I say Latin, I don't mean like the like salsa dancing or like that sort of thing. I mean like music from music in Spanish that are like chill. If you wanna listen to something that I really like, I'll share it with you guys. It's a Uruguayan compositor. I love him. His name is Jorge Drexler. I'll just put it in the chat there. So it's a really cool, like, if you wanna, you know, have a listen to in Spotify. It's in Spanish, but he's a really good composer. Like, the music is very catchy. I listen to that type of music when I'm working. That's kind of like a background music, right? If I want to, by the way, that guy, if you have seen a movie called Motorcycle Diaries about um, the story of, it's I'm not gonna get into that, but basically it's a really good movie called Motorcycle Diaries, about Che Guevara and Granados, his friend. They took a motorbike all the way from, where was it from? I think, well, from Argentina or from Venezuela. I forgot already. Through the whole Latin America. So the movie is all about that travel, um, and Jorge Drexler, he composed one of the very prominent pieces of music for that. I don't know. Anyway, I really like his music, and the lyrics is very interesting and inspiring, because he uses a lot of metaphors in the lyrics. So I find it really inspiring in a way. It's kind of like listening to poetry, but with catchy rhythm. So it's very, yeah. You can imagine like worlds and situations and things the way that he describes them in the music. So it's really cool. Again, not only my favorite music, it's also, I also listen to funk music, and that's most of the time when I need to concentrate and work. So what I'm doing right now, which is sketching and pulling and things like that, I will just put like funk or something like heartbeat all the time, so that it keeps my energy going in a way, or like a good pace, and I work a little bit faster, I think, or that's the illusion that I'm in, on that I can work faster if I have like fast-paced music. Probably not the case, but you know what I mean. When I dynamesh the models, it creates holes. Is there any ways to fix it? Yeah, absolutely. So if I had a hole somewhere here, and that's usually the case if you use Sculptris Pro as well, it sometimes creates these little holes, but that is just because ZBrush is trying to maintain volumes while recreating the entire, the entire mesh and topology. So it is bound to happen sometimes. There is a very easy way to fix it. I have it in my custom palette straight away. So it's this one, close holes. So if you go to your geometry palette or geometry sub palette here, there is a sub tab here called modify topology. So on the modify topology, which is to modify the topology, just close holes, and anything that is open, it will close. That's it. So you close hole and you redynamesh, and that's it. Do you live in Australia? Yeah, I live in Melbourne. I'm wondering what your big scene brush button does. Change the dynamic brush scale. Yeah. So sometimes when I work, for example, with a character creator, which is, I sometimes use that to set up the a base mesh, like a full body character base mesh, and I work with the scale of that software just to keep it. The brush is very, very tiny, so clicking on this is just gonna give me basically, these are custom macros, which what they do, if you go to the draw palette, it just increases this Mac brush size all the way up, as well as the dynamic brush scale. So that allows me to work with larger scales. That's yeah, that's really all that there is to it. Something bothering me about the eyes, and I think it's because we don't have like a very well defined eyebrow area. All right, I think I'm gonna leave it as it is. Again, this is something that I would keep tweaking for a long time, but I think we are in a good place to start adding some imperfections, or further turning this into another clay render. One more go with the move brush, just with from the distance, just general shapes. Another cool tip that I can give you right now is you can use the mask pen to mask out a region, like around the eyes, for example, that you want to keep, and then you can further refine the entire proportions of the face without affecting the eyes. And I'm not super happy with the mouth. It is like pretty generic. So I don't know, we can do something about it. But again, I wanted to show you the clay brushes, so let's just get onto that. Let me undo a few of this stuff, because I wrecked what I had. Alrighty. Can you also try well points? Maybe there's vertices that aren't connected somehow. Okay, we're talking about the close holes, I think. Just, you have a tiny bit of an Australian accent. Yeah, have a couple of friends that make fun of me when I say here, the word here, because yeah, with the American accent is very, I think it's very, very telling. Like, here, I live here, in a way, and I cannot say that, so I just go here. This is where I live. Where do you live? I live here. Or where are you gonna meet? I'm gonna meet up here. And that's like, they make fun of me. Bullies. Anyway, all right, let's go ahead and bring in the brushes. So I have them already installed in my custom brushes set. Let me just very quickly bring it back in case you don't know what I'm talking about before I get into it. We have about 30 minutes to play around with those. It's called the Digital Clay Pack. You can go to the ZBrush Guides website, and it should be one of the first things that you see in there. If you follow me on Instagram as well, it's in my profile, so you can click on the, I think, oh no, I changed it now. So now the profile sends you to the challenge. But anyway, the clay pack Comes with 30 brushes to achieve like this type of look, and that's what I'm gonna be showing you, like what are the differences and yeah, what to expect from the brushes, because they're very different from most brushes that you'll find online in terms of how they behave. So I'm gonna show you like the difference between the the types, or the difference between the different categories that I set up. Let's see. So the brush pack comes with this PDF. It's a quick guide showing you what the brushes are, what to use them. So basically, you can find there are 6 different categories. Sorry, 5 different categories. So you have base clay, and this is the one that I'm going to start using to achieve this very rough pass of clay, almost like when you're putting chunks of clay all together. That is the first pass, just to further refine the base. But just using 1 or 2 brushes is not going to give you the full effect. So this is just to establish the first pass in a way. Then you have the clay brushes, and these brushes have a bunch of extra, it gives you happy mistakes in a way. This one is one of my favorites. The clay layer is strong, and they behave like clay brushes, so you can build volume and keep sculpting and refining, but at the same time it will add these details and these imperfections, which I think is ideal. Then you have detailing brushes, just to add like cuts clean and cuts texture. Is like if you imagine working like very rough, your fingernails go into the clay, or you accidentally move things with a rake brush or something, and it just creates those imperfections. That's this type of stuff as well. And the fingerprints, obviously, if you keep pushing and molding the clay, you will leave those imprints as well. So this one is kind of something that I would necessarily wouldn't do until the end, but in this case it's good to mix it up, and I'll show you why in a second. Knives and rakes, these ones are some of the best brushes that I think I could come up with for this pack, and it's something that I've been using for a while, and I just refined them a little bit so that they're more user friendly than what I know would work for myself. There's much brushes. These ones are just to add even further refinement and trimming and polishing. The wet brush is the best brush. This wet brush gives a really nice effect. It's just the best brush, I think, from the pack, and that's it. The rest are just like how to use the rest of the stuff. So let's go ahead and start with that. So I'm gonna start with the base. This base smudging is gonna be pretty cool. Like I said, I'm gonna duplicate so that then we see the result at the end. So I'm gonna duplicate that, turn 1 off, and I'm gonna increase the resolution quite a bit. There we go. So I'm gonna start on the sides, just because I want to keep the center line a little bit cleaner so that it creates that asymmetry effect. And one of the things with these brushes is that they actually work really well if you have large brushes. So if I go like this, putting a lot of pressure, you see it sort of maintain that line, that base. That's why it's a base clay. It doesn't change the volume too much, but it destroys a little bit the kind of like the topology, but it's not too bad. Like if I turn polyframe, it's not too bad, right? And that's the idea with this brush. It just allows you to go ahead and do this type of quick breaks on the clay, like this, which is exactly what I wanted to feel like. Like it's not polished, and it's just the look that I'm after in a way. And the reason I say these ones are not as common type of brushes that you'll find online. Most of the things that you'll find online for I'm not saying for clay or for just any general purpose, they will be like this. This is the only brush in the entire pack that is drag rect, which means that you can click and drag and apply this sort of like smudging of clay. So that is the only one from this pack that you can actually click and drag and create this effect. The rest of the brushes are actually brushes that you can use like any other sculpting brush. So you don't have to click and drag. You can just keep sculpting in a way, and that's, I think, more useful in this scenario. So I'm gonna use another one, the spread this one is what it does. It's sort of like you draw a line, and ZBrush will spread the clay in a way. So maybe it's very obvious in here. So as I do this, it's sort of like it's pushing them towards the sides, and it's also creating this kind of like raking effect. So again, it doesn't change the volume as much depending on how much pressure you're adding, as of course, but it helps to create these lines that, you know, affect the entire look of the mesh. And I think it just creates something that looks, you know, very, very interesting. Obviously, the size that you use to create this base is going to affect the overall scale, or how big the sculpture feels like. So if you add a fingerprint that is like the size of half of the head, it's going to be a tiny little, you know, it will give the sense that this is a tiny piece of clay. I'm going to go ahead and bring in another clay. I probably don't get a chance to show you all of them, but let's use these clay chunks. So this one will give you, I'm going to turn off symmetry now actually. So it gives you those chunks of clay, like if I'm putting pieces of clay on top of each other. And this is what I what I meant about like being very quick to add these details and destroy this even further. So that's why I did keep it very, very sketchy. I'll show you my favorite one, which is this layer strong, and this one creates the same effect, but it has a very sharp edge all around the pieces or the areas of clay that you're adding. So it creates that, you know, these cuts almost, which are in my opinion kind of like the best way of telling whether or not something is 3D or not, because it's very, very sketchy. Again, very it creates this tactile effect that you feel is almost like, yeah, this is someone that is working on something but is clearly not finished. Whereas in 3D, sometimes you don't get that effect straight away, or it's actually harder to get imperfections in 3D, I think. But this is what this brush does. It just you draw around and it produces these imperfections, and the fact that it's a little bit random, so you have control over the direction of the stroke, but the fact that it's a little bit random, it helps to create these happy mistakes in a way. So let's just add up a couple of those. I use this one quite a bit, to be honest. It's just one of the favorite ones. And of course, this is the idea with this stream, is just to show you most of the brushes, or as many brushes as I can. So it will be a medley of brushes, but again, it's not just one single effect. The idea of the brush is to use multiple brushes in the same sculpture to get it where you want it to be. So this is just something that I really like using, because it also creates the effect of, if you have like a spatula and like wet clay, you have your clay bead and then you start like cutting things as well, and it just creates those very chunks and almost polished areas. And this brush also respects the certain depth as well, so it's not going to add a lot of details. Oh, sorry, no, it's not going to add a lot of volume. Instead, it's just going to keep the details close to the original volume. So if you have your original volumes sort of like all done, then this one is going to respect it. So that's kind of like what I like about this brush, is that it gives you those very clayish looking pieces. Let's just refine the lips, but it doesn't affect the volumes too much, or the forms. So even just with that clay, with that brush, it does feel more like a clay sculpture. In fact, we can just switch to this more reflective surface and then just give it a tiny bit of color. And it already feels more like a clay piece. I'm gonna go for a different color. Right? And those are details that you get straight away from the brushes without too much tweaking or anything, or not tweaking at all. It's just start sculpting in the same way that you would do with other brushes. Let's just refine these ones. Okay, let's work on another one. I'm gonna show you. Let's go for clay flicks. So this one is a good one to create even further imperfections. This one will respect the current volume that you have. It will respect the surface that you have established, but depending on the difference and the pressure that you apply to, it's just gonna add like little flicks of clay. And that's kind of like when you, like if you ever work with clay, you're working and then you just made a mistake or just push things to break apart a piece of clay, and then you put another one and that sort of thing. In the breaks of clay, then you create that, that imperfection of the clay breaking apart and that sort of thing. So it adds these little flicks. I don't know how else to put it. Sometimes the name of the brushes, I just keep the same names that I name them for myself, so they don't necessarily make a lot of sense for some of you guys. I try to make them feel like that makes sense, but for me, like, this effect is just like flicking the clay. So that's why I call it the flicks. But that's why I also wanted to give you a bit of a rundown of these brushes so that they kind of like make more sense. Sometimes the names are not very obvious, but that's essentially what that one does. You get all of these little things that's coming from this brush. So all of these little flicks. A quick pass on that, and then we're good to go. I'm gonna go ahead and bring in. I want to show you, where is it? Fingerprints. I want to show you the difference between, there are two fingerprints that look pretty much the same. One is called fingerprint detailing and the other one is called fingerprint overlay. The difference between these two, and again, that's part of the what's in the guide that I shared. The difference is one of these ones will override the details, or it will change the actual didn't load it, sorry. I'm gonna load overlays. So overlays is a bit stronger, and you'll see it sort of like smashes some of the details that we created with the other brushes, right? But it creates the effect of the fingerprints. Whereas the detailing, it's going to respect the details that you create a bit more. So it's not overriding them as much or overlaying them. So yeah, this is just a brush that allows you to go over certain areas and add fingerprints. This brush it has, like, the alpha of this brush has a lot of details. So if you don't have enough resolution, you might not be able to see this very well, and it's just gonna smash and destroy your topology or the look that you're going for. So make sure that if you're using this, right now I have a Dynamesh of 1000, so I have enough resolution to be able to see those details. Here are the two knives. We still have plenty of time, like 15 minutes or so. So the knives, these two are really handy. I use them for a bunch of stuff, not just clay. So these are the knives. Actually, I just changed them a bit. So if I go to my essential brushes, you'll see I have this butter knife, PM butter knife. That is something that I use all the time. That is the same knife, or similar. I just tweak a few things to make it more easy and user friendly, but it's the same knife that I use for a lot of different things. It's kind of like an alternative almost to my /3, to the ZBrush/3 or the damp standard brush. So this one, it gives you a lot of control. So I'm gonna press really, like, not a lot of pressure. You see you have these lines like this, and then if you press really hard, the difference is massive, right? So it gives you a lot of control with the pressure, and is very very smooth. It doesn't create any, like, you won't be able to see instances of the brush, which sometimes happens with the damp standard brush. And also it respects the initial, it respects the depth, or the initial depth. So in other words, if I do this, right, this is one line, and then I go over the same area with another line, you see this is almost respecting that area here, so it's not pushing it too much. So that's something that I use to, let's say, cut in to the mesh and then define some planes, so that it looks kind of like I took my spatula or something else, and then just define the planes of the head like this. So these are like type of lines that I would like to see in that final look. Like it's literally just a knife. So I would use that very loosely, as in creating these cuts so that it looks like I went ahead with an actual knife and defined the planes of my clay, and then work on those, like, to keep the proportions right. You know, faking the effect of a bit more planning. I guess that's the idea with this knife. The other knife, though, is, I mean, is very similar. It just has a more wet look, or a more wet feel to it. So it's almost like a very strong but liquid almost knife. So you don't have as much control in terms of the pressure. Very little control with the pressure, but you can control it with the size. So you're gonna get very sharp cuts that are consistent, and they're gonna sort of like smooth out the edges. So this one is also pretty good for the same thing, really. It's just a variant. You can play around with those and see which one you like the most. But again, it's another knife. Where is it? This one. So the clay rough chunks. This is also another clay brush that allows you to continue further refine the details, but it adds like these very chunky pieces of clay. So this one is better with a large brush size. I want to do it here, but I haven't done much, so you can see. So it just adds this very rough pass of clay, but it allows you to sort of like change the volume quite a bit, and it adds these chunks of clay. So for any area that is going to be kind of like on the edge, it should be a pretty decent brush. All right. Of course, this is like super rough. We need to probably go ahead and tweak it or tone it down, all the effect of these brushes. So that's why you have the trim and the polishing brushes. So you have these trim 1 and 2. They're pretty good to just start knocking down the effect a little bit, or toning it down while maintaining some of the details. So if I go on this area that is pretty rough and I use my trim, I can trim it down, but you'll see it doesn't, it's not like using the trim dynamic or the edge polish that will just completely flatten the area. This one will respect some of those initial details, and it would add even more as you go. So this one is really cool to just go over areas that maybe the effect is too intense, and then just refine that. So like here on the nose maybe. You can think about these ones as just trim brushes for polishing that are specifically designed for this workflow of clay, because it maintains the some of the initial details as well as adding further ones, further details. All right. They're pretty similar, the two options that you have, 1 and 2. The difference is the strength and the amount of details that will be erased. So again, that's another brush that, or another 2 brushes that is better to just play around with those and see which one gives you the effect that you're after, but you have the 2 options in there. Right? Hopefully this is somehow useful. Let's go ahead and use, let's see. So we have the Rake Wet, which is one of my favorite as well. This one, it gives you that effect of the rake that you would use in real clay, but it has that wet effect. So just to refine volumes is really good, because it cuts through the model, but it doesn't have like a super strong effect. As in, it doesn't change the volume too much. Plus, it gives you that really nice effect of the clay being worked on with a rake brush around there, whatever the areas you use it. So yeah, again, I'm trying to use all of the brushes, depending on the look that I'm going for, in terms of clay, how rough the clay is, how work in progress it is. I would probably don't use all of them. I would just use a few. But that's roughly the effect of the rake. You can use it to refine volumes and also to create that effect. There are a couple more. There is an alternative rake. This one is based purely on the rake brush that comes with ZBrush. It just has a few settings tweaked so that it gives you more control, I think. At least to me, it gives me more control over the areas. It doesn't destroy or change the volume as fast, and it also has that wet quality to it. So this one is, in terms of polishing and refining volumes, this one is probably one of my favorites, because you have a lot of control and it keeps the clay looking very, very clayish, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's the rake, the alternative rake. I think it's one of the best ones of this pack. Then you also have the wet clay brush, which I'll show you in a second, before we wrap it up with a couple of details. Let me just check the chat. This is great, cool, glad you like it. Not a problem, man. If you want UVs, if you want to UV these, would it be best to retopologize it roughly, or maybe remesh it then UV? Yeah. Actually, I would retopologize and create UVs if you want to keep UVs at this stage, like before we go into the clay. So at this stage, you can just do much easier, because there's less volumes that ZBrush needs to consider. You can just create a retopology, or recreate this with the ZRemesher very quickly, do some UVs, and then start sculpting with subdivision all of these details. That would be the ideal approach in this sense. No worries, Brecky. Take care. See you in the extra mile tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow. If you have separate geometry pieces, do you recommend Dynamesh them together before moving into doing clay, or you can keep the pieces separate? You can keep the pieces separate. I have my eyes. The eyes are separate. I don't think you need to merge them. You can go ahead and with brushes just try to refine them a little bit so that it looks more like you carved in the eyes rather than having separate geometry, but up to you. This rake brush is actually really good for this, like around the eyes, to create, give a bit of direction, as if you were like polishing them, thinking about the direction here. So that's another good way to use these ones. All right, let me show you the my favorite brush of them all. I mean, this is pretty close to my favorite, but the wet brush is just really cool, because this is the wet brush. It polishes. It has the effect of the rake, the polishing, and the smooth brush all at once, and the trim ones as well. So let's say this area right here. If I go over that area, when I do it a little bit harder, right? So you see it respects the surface, but it also adds the rakes effect, adds a little bit of texture, and it also smooth as you pass through many times. So this one is like although it's not as complex as you might think in terms of the settings, is the most complex effect of all of them in the pack, and it allows you to refine the sculpture quite a bit. So that's why I included it, because it is just really handy, not only for clay effect. So you can use this in a lot of contexts, this clay, this wet brush, just to refine any other sculpture really, or any other type of sculpture. Just need to be aware that it's gonna create this this effect, or this set of details, additional details. So as long as you're aware of that, you can then go ahead and further refine it with a smooth brush or something. So that's why I said this is the favorite brush of the pack, or the best one. All right, and you'll see that I sort of like have polished or removed some of those initial details that we created with the other brushes, with the base ones, as I refine the sculpture with these new brushes that I'm adding. And that is why I set them up in this fashion, so that the workflow itself of how you achieve this clay result, it mimics as well the real process of clay. So you start with a very chunky piece, you start cutting, defining planes, and then you start bringing some brushes, and like real brushes, smoothing it out with water, that sort of thing. So that's why I build them in that way, and I want to show you the process, because it's very similar to the approach that you would take in like a real studio working with clay. All right. So I think that is looking good. Let's do a quick final pass. Actually, maybe let's refine those cuts a bit more. So this is using the same wet brush, but holding the Alt key also will push the geometry and sort of like fix those areas as well. That's another use for this brush, because the normal effect is just kind of like a trim effect, but if you hold the Alt key, it's just going to invert the effect and bring the geometry back closer to the surface, kind of like filling in the gaps. So that's why, another reason why this is the best brush. So this is the best brush of the pack. All right. So what I'm going to do now is just bring in some final details, some of the brushes, just to detail this this head, and we'll call it a day. Let's bring the cut clean with a large brush, and then just go quickly over everything. I mean, this one works in the same way as the other brushes. It's just how much pressure you apply and how big those details you want it to be based on the brush size, and how many of these cuts you actually want. If you want smaller cuts, just reduce your brush size, and that's it. That's really all there is to it. You see, it's pretty easy. I'm gonna use, let's see, which one haven't I showed you? This base, I can also use the base brushes at the end. This one will spread, but it's gonna smooth out the surface now, so I'm gonna avoid that. Let's use the fingerprints again. Just adding a bit of those. I'm gonna establish the size of the fingerprints by changing the brush size, and just using this brush with a consistent brush size is gonna ensure that the fingerprint effect is gonna be consistent all across. All right, and just to wrap it up, I think that's it for the brushes. Again, part of the idea of the brushes is just to discover what they do. This clay layer directional is kind of like if you're smudging the clay with, no, sorry, not that one. Where is it? It's called smudging advance. Is it this one? No. Here, smudge advance. So it's like if you're taking a piece of clay and then you push it with your thumbs all around. So this one will keep the details, but with a large brush size, you'll have the effect of you being pushing the clay all around. Maybe let's do it here. Obviously, this is not necessarily the effect I want for this. I want to do it in a separate mesh very quickly. So you see, there we go. So it just creates that effect. So this one could be used with the base brushes as well. So you have this ball of clay, right? And then you go with the wet brush, or I'm going to show you something else, the Rake trim, which has a lot of texture. It trims down the brush, but it uses this Rake effect, and that gives you a very quick way to achieve something something good, I guess, something very clayish like. This is the wet brush again. I use that for everything. And that's it. That's a ball of clay. So anyway, let's go back to this one. And oh yeah, I was gonna let's wrap it up here with the brushes. I'm just gonna use the move brush with the AccuCurve without symmetry, and just add a bit of asymmetry so that it's not the same. Change the expression a bit. And of course you can combine them with the brushes in ZBrush, the standard ones. So this is the effect. I'm gonna do something here. So this is the effect of the damp standard brush, which is very super useful, and is one of the brushes that I use most of the time when I'm defining things like this. But if you want something stronger with more control, you can use the knife, right? So it's gonna give you something a bit more sharper. Alright, just gonna do some more definition here on the eyelids using the knife. And this is a really good one as well to redefine that eyelid bulging here of the fat of the eye. And also, just to wrap it up, you can also use this with an alt, with the alt effect, just to further define the edge of this eyelid, for example. All right, I think we are done. So I'm gonna show you side by side. I'm gonna duplicate the eyes, and actually I'm gonna go into the eyes, increase the resolution of Dynamesh them maybe a bit more, right? and I'm gonna use a soft brush, maybe the Rake wet, just to add some indications of that this is also made out of clay. More resolution, but it's gonna be enough. Also, let's use the wet brush. When in doubt, just use the wet brush. All right, so that's those are going to be the eyes for this one, and I think it's pretty good. Let's go ahead and merge them together. I'll do the same thing with this guy. Merge down. All right, and let's do a quick save. So you could potentially just retopologize the previous head and then project the details of the clay. Like, I haven't actually changed much the volumes, so it should be okay. Right, so that is, in a nutshell, the effect of the clay brushes. So you can go from something like I have here on the left hand side to the one on the right with the clay brushes. Rather quick. So this is something that we did in the last 20 minutes of the stream. So we set up the entire head, and in the last 20 minutes we actually created the details, which is that's the the whole purpose of the brushes, to help you out with this process, which is once you have a grasp of what they do and an idea what the brushes do, it's a very simple thing to do. Patricio, all of those brushes are your own, we can download? Yep, absolutely. You can go to the, I just shared, let me just do it again. I'll share the link in here. So you can go to that website and then you can get them from there. One brush I'm missing there is a knife cut with visible small crumbs of clay on the edge. Yeah, that will be interesting. I might do an update later on. We'll see. Earlier on, someone asked about the UVs and the ability to tile the texture. So yeah, having the UVs on wrap, you can get away with alternative production methods like triplanar. Yep. So let's say if I want to render this guy with clay, what I would do at this point, if I don't have UVs, I'll just send it to Keyshot or Maverick Render, any of the renders that I'm currently using, and I just overlay a text with triplanar projection, one of the textures that come also with the pack, and they will work fine. But yeah, if you want to actually project these details over a mesh that has UVs, you can totally do it. You can take the one on the left hand side, retopologize, then take the other one and project those details once you have the retopology, and that's it. Alrighty, cool. So if there's nothing else, guys, I'm gonna wrap it up here because we are over the limit now. Hopefully you have found these ones useful. This kind of like overview of the brushes. Again, the brushes pack are on the ZBrush Guides website. And just for those of you who joined us later, just want to make sure that you don't miss the current contest, the 2020 First Contact contest that is currently on the website. So if you just go to the ZBrush Guides website, you can just go to it's one of the first things that you'll see as well. So there's amazing prizes to be won. Wacom and Pixologic and the 3D Concept Artist website are the sponsors of this challenge, and the panel is absolutely fantastic. You have about 36 days to complete it, and I think the theme is pretty cool. It's kind of like a sci-fi thing, but it's up to you. It's completely open for interpretation. Here are the prizes, the guidelines. Here are the judges. Amazing panel again. And submitting your work is pretty simple. Just make sure that you read the guidelines, and also if you submit your work in the next few days, I don't think there's going to be many submissions until in a few weeks when you actually work on something new and submit it. But If it doesn't appear on the gallery straight away, just hang on a second there because I have to manually approve the entries. And there's gonna be a like a people's award in a way, so you can actually vote even if you're not participating. You can actually go here and go to the vote tab when there is entries. At the moment it's pretty new, there's no entries right now, and then you can actually click and vote to get that people's award. Like the most popular with most votes is probably going to win, or is going to win. So anyway, that's it. That's it for me, guys. Make sure that you check the contest. It's going to be pretty awesome. You have plenty of time to come up with something really cool. And yeah, the clay pack is also there in the ZBrush guides. So it's been a pleasure, guys. I'll see you next week, and yeah, take it easy. I'll see you next time. Cheers.